What I thought I'd do is, if okay, I might run in order of the screen here and actually get Brett to just kick things off. Brett Ince, Executive Director of Tourism Greater Geelong the Bellarine, and perhaps give the group an update on what's actually happening, what their plans are, maybe what they need from us. So Brett, I hope you are there somewhere.
Thanks, Jen. Can you
all... Hello.
Hey, yeah, all good. I decided to change my background today so it looked a little bit more like the region instead of my spare bedroom, as we all are at the moment. So first of all, thanks for having me, and I think it was a really great opportunity to bring both organisations together and certainly have some really important discussions on this topic. And as Jen said, Jen and I have had a number of discussions certainly over the past 8 to 10 weeks as we've all worked through the journey of COVID. And part of that is really, having a look at what has gone on in our market and what does that mean for the region, but also how we do work towards the future in terms of what are the opportunities as well. There's a few points that I just wanted to raise today, but a lot of it does relate to certainly how our organisation has worked through supporting businesses. Certainly looking at what has been considered around relief, and also how do we plan for recovery and how do we reboot the tourism industry as we move forward. And I think, another really important point for us all to consider is the length that the tourism industry does have in terms of the length and breadth of the industry. So many of you would hear a lot of the time that sometimes we speak in the jargon of visitor economy as opposed to tourism industry. Visitor economy also relates to all of those different reasons why people that aren't residents actually come into our region. So when you think about the visitor economy, that can also include, the business events sector, which is a very important part of what we do. Also the construction industry in terms of workers that are coming in and staying in accommodation over periods of time, the business trade that happens in that regard as well. So we often talk about visitor economy as opposed to tourism. And it was quite interesting just in the past few weeks that we received the statistics for our last quarter and our last year. And it was an interesting one to receive because it was the best that we've ever done as a region. So we're now a region that brings in 6.4 million visitors per annum, and it showed nearly a 20% increase year on year, and it's a $1.1 billion industry to the region as well, and that was a 14% increase year on year. So we didn't spring that from the rooftops because we didn't think it was appropriate, certainly with businesses at the moment, and it'll be interesting to see the next statistics. But what that does show is that we are a very strong region and industry in our own right. And as a comparison, in terms of that 6.4 million visitors that we receive per annum, the Great Ocean Road receives about 8 million visitors per annum. So that shows that it does link as a good comparison and does show that we're a very strong industry in its own right. As I move forward, and we'll discuss a few items, and very happy for this to be conversational as we go through. But one other point that we did last week, actually, and we provided this out to our members, and we have about 600 businesses that we work directly with in the region. There's about 1,200 tourism businesses across the broader region, so that's just the membership that we work directly with. We surveyed our members to see how they were operating, and particularly in the scheme of the JobKeeper allowance, considering some of the relief measures that have been provided at federal, state and local level, and what that has achieved for their business. So what was interesting out of the survey, we got about a 20% response rate. The business types that responded, it was a pretty interesting mix. There was sort of 30% accommodation, 30% eating and drinking, 11% tours and transport, 11% attractions, and then that linked back down to events, professional services, and even retail was in that as well. So what we heard was that 50% of businesses are still operating in some capacity. 50% of businesses have closed or put their businesses into hibernation over this period. And when we ask the question of, out of those 50% of businesses that are still operating, what is the percentage of their usual trade. So on any normal day, if we were running a normal sort of trade, what are they doing at this current stage? And what we heard was that 43% of those businesses that are still trading are trading at less than 10% of their usual trade. So that just shows the impact that it's had on the tourism industry. And, you know, that's across the whole board. That's international. It does show how hard hit the region has been from this scenario. We heard that 24% of those businesses are operating between 10 and 30% of their usual trade. And then 15% of businesses are operating at 30 to 50% of their usual trade. So it just shows the magnitude of the difference of what's going on, and the importance of what we need to do as an organisation, but what we need to do as a community also to support tourism-related businesses through this time. And, you know, part of that is looking at the way that businesses have transitioned. And one silver lining is certainly many businesses have been able to access the JobKeeper allowance. And a number of businesses have spoken to me about how that has helped their business and helped them to transition and consider how they can operate in some sort of capacity. So a really good example of that, and I'm sure many of us have used this throughout the region, you know, are things like the hospitality sector, providing takeaways and deliveries, you know, considering the way in which they can transition their business to online trading, to look at, you know, deliveries of purchases and products and those sorts of things, trying to consider, you know, gift vouchers or planning your holiday in the future, or providing a special gift, certainly Mother's Day coming up, you know, for mothers that support tourism related businesses in the hospitality sector. So those sorts of things have been one silver lining to get us through this, you know, this phase at the moment. But that's not discounting the fact that there's a lot of businesses out there that are hurting considerably and are wanting to see some light at the end of the tunnel through this approach. And, you know, many of us are following the media at the moment. I read an article in the Australian Financial Review this morning that spoke about the Prime Minister in his press conference yesterday, trying to get, you know, businesses back to business and trying to get to some sort of new normal by July. So, you know, a lot of that will relate certainly to our sector and what that looks like. And, you know, a lot of the consumer sentiment that's coming through focuses on what does that look like for the tourism industry. You know, is that the opportunity for visiting friends and relatives to come to homes and reconnect in that way? Is it the opportunity for day trips? Is it the opportunity for short breaks? So what does the market look like? I think we all know that international tourism is going to take a long time to rebound. The Trans-Tasman bubble would be very exciting for many of us. And the New Zealand market is a really important market for Australia. It delivers a lot of short breaks and a lot of repeat visitation. So I think that gives us a lot of hope. And for an industry and an area like Geelong and the Bellarine, the majority of the visitation that we receive, half of it is from visiting friends and relatives, and a lot of it is from domestic short breaks. So we're not as reliant on that international base, but we also saw the international tourism sector as an opportunity to grow, and certainly with additional destinations coming into Avalon Airport in that sense as well. So from my point of view, we've been working with our board, we've been working with our organisation, but also looking at the strategies that have been coming through from Tourism Australia. We've been in regular briefings with both Tourism Australia and Visit Victoria. So we are the avenue to those organisations. And Tourism Australia, in their first time in about 15 years, is actually working towards domestic tourism campaigns, which isn't usually their mandate. So for the next 2 years, you'll see a lot of coverage come out about holiday here this year. So consider your holiday in Australia, consider the way in which you can have multiple holidays throughout Australia and multiple short breaks, as opposed to a lot of Australians that do go overseas and spend a lot of their time travelling internationally. And similarly with Visit Victoria had commenced a campaign around the bushfire times, you know, and that seems like a very distant memory earlier in the year, but you know, in terms of that bushfire recovery message, it was about a short stay goes a long way. So we're very lucky that we're within, you know, that 60 to 90 minute radius of Melbourne. Melbourne is a significant market. for short break visitation. And, you know, we will see that drive market come back very quickly. And a lot of the initial reports that are coming out around, you know, how will we rebound? It is very much around that visiting friends and relatives, domestic short break market, and also domestic business events. So, you know, when you think about even in many of our own organisations, we haven't been able to connect face to face with our colleagues. So there will be that opportunity around retreats, smaller domestic business events, and Geelong's very much in that setting of being a really desirable destination for that. And within our organisation, we have Business Events Geelong that focuses on that as well. So a couple of further key points, and I know there's a few questions coming up there, so very much happy to answer some of those questions as we go through. But when we've looked at our planning and where we are in terms of our planning, you know, to a broader future, we're very much in that restricted movement crisis mode at the moment. So, you know, there's a lot of people that are in that frustration and boredom phase. I know I am a little bit sitting at home and spending a lot of time looking at a lot of online forums, looking towards virtual tours, those sorts of things. And part of that is that how our intent can work towards reigniting the dream. So lifting the spirits of you know, and the taste around Australia, how we can consider, you know, short-term travel, how we can dream. And a part of that is how we can work with some of our organisations to consider that. And we've seen, you know, just from an entertainment point of view, the likes of Piano Bar consecutively 7 nights a week, actually providing, you know, entertainment through our screens. Geelong Arts Centre launching their Friday nights, which is really important from that point of view as well. But as we move forward and hopefully towards the end of this week and from Monday, we'll see some changes. Not that we expect that there'll be massive restriction changes, but we may go down a stage to what we were previously. That will help to rise optimism. And certainly from our point of view, we need to be focusing on, you know, providing opportunities, certainly in our marketing and our approaches around booking interest, providing, you know, people the opportunity to dream and move towards planning. So, you know, there will be a lot of people that will want to start to book that short break, consider the way in which they can actually visit a destination or visit their friends and relatives. And, you know, eventually we'll move through to that free movement scenario, so that new normality, and that will drive bookings. And, you know, one of those final pieces that I just wanted to quickly touch on is the fact that within Victoria, Victorians spend $32 billion on travel. 32 billion, it's a significant number. And what's interesting about that is that 15 billion of that number is spent intrastate. So that is certainly the vast majority is Melburnians travelling, you know, around Victoria. But what's interesting is that there is 21 billion that is actually spent outside of Victoria by Victorians, interstate or internationally. And our opportunity and our hope, certainly as Geelong and Bellarine, is to look at some of that spend coming to our region. So part of that is that we've been planning with our board, and our 2021 plan looks towards our branding, our destination stories. We've had a lot of talk about this in the context of each of our sub-regions. So we break up the region into 6 sub-regions: the You Yangs region, the Mirrabal Valley, what we see as urban Geelong, the Northern Bellarine, the Southern Bellarine, and Queenscliff Point Lonsdale. So we're working with a creative agency to look at tourism positioning and campaigns so that we're ready to reboot when the time is right. And part of that is really getting into the hearts and minds of domestic visitors, particularly Melbourne market. But as we also see some of those short haul destinations open up via Avalon Airport, and in the future, certainly Tasmania with the great announcement, those opportunities to get into the hearts and minds of what are the reasons to why you would come into our region. Certainly cultural tourism is a big part of that, telling those deep stories and connections. And we've been doing quite a bit of work with Wadawurrung Aboriginal Corporation around that as well, to make sure that they're providing some significant input on those cultural spaces, those cultural trails, those storylines that want to be told through this approach, so that we're then connecting visitors with that full history, that full story, and that cultural element to our landscape. as well as the built assets, of course, through our food and drink assets, through our events, and events will look different in the future, but also the opportunity to create more reasons to visit than what people consider our region for right now. So what I'll do is I'll leave it at that. There's certainly some questions coming through. Our board and our organisation is looking towards supporting businesses as much as we can, and part of that is that we're actually providing free membership for 6 months of the new financial year, and a big part of that is how we work smarter and better, and also connect to some potential recovery funding coming through different channels. So thank you, everybody. Thanks for the opportunity. And Jen, I know there's a couple of questions there.
Yeah, so do you mind just answering those? Because I'm not sure they're sort of Justin or Brett Winter's questions. So maybe just quickly run through those. I know you answered about the virtual tours a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. So certainly I'm just having a look at some of those first questions there. So interesting, you know, in terms of our tourism sector, in terms of the fall during the colder months, what's interesting for us, and that's why I did premise this with the different myriads of tourism sectors that we have in the region, whilst, you know, the summer period is our absolute peak, and you see that by holiday homes, you know, annual summer holidays down on the coast and so forth. Because we have a very different offer, particularly in Geelong and central Geelong, a lot of our tourism sector is stemmed from events during colder months. Obviously, the football's a big consideration to that. But in addition to that, the business event sector is a big part of that as well. So this is going to be a winter period like no other, because we're going to be heavily restricted. However, it doesn't stop visiting friends and relatives coming, and it doesn't stop domestic short breaks. And, you know, the one competitive advantage that we certainly have in our region is wine and wineries, and, you know, the opportunity there to really push on the heartstrings of red wine, winter Shiraz, all of those sorts of things that do happen. That will help us to have some visitation, but it is hard to, you know, crystal ball what it's going to look like over our colder months. So we hope domestic business events and those sorts of things will really help to drive some change. Philippa, I see that question around virtual tours, and I know some of our cultural facilities have been considering that, even in the context of our heritage, our collection through the City of Greater Geelong, bringing some of the artefacts and so forth to life. I know that Martin Payton and the Arts and Culture team have been working towards that. And that's really extending, you know, I spoke before about Piano Bar and Geelong Arts Centre and some of the entertainment. How do we stem those virtual tours? So we're working towards that and looking into that. And Richard, there's a question there around sporting events and the contribution to the visitor economy. There was an article in the Advertiser today that was speaking about the loss that we'll have through Geelong major events. I think it was around $65 million that we'll see from those events that have either been cancelled or postponed. That's considerable, and we are a destination that is driven by events. I don't know the exact number around sporting events per se, but what I would say is that we're very conscious that that will have a big impact for us as we move towards the new normal. And we hope that in some capacity that we will see some scenarios coming out of how events can run later in the year. But really that is dependent on the health advice, and we need to be very conscious of the health advice at the moment and make sure that we don't necessarily see a second wave of COVID, which could, you know, bring more closures. So small steps. And, you know, I think we've done a really great job as a region to band together and support one another. But as we come out of this, we need to work very collaboratively as we move forward. One final comment there I see from Joe. So,
another one.
Yeah. So Joe was just speaking about the Gordons working with government and both the hospitality and tourism industry on a skills and training package to support business. Just yesterday, we were having some discussions around this. And part of it is, and what we're hearing is that certainly long term, there's still that level of investment being considered into infrastructure from a tourism perspective. You just have to see that change. And I'm sure Brett will talk about Spirit of Tasmania in a little while. But what I'm, I suppose, speaking about is that hotel investment, the investment as we move forward on the Convention Exhibition Centre through the Geelong City deal. So, you know, we are still going to need a very strong workforce as we move forward. And, you know, we anticipate that there's about 7,500 jobs that contribute towards the tourism sector in the region at the moment. And in our figures previously, we'd seen that moving to 11,500 jobs by 2027. So that shows that we need to continue to upskill and make sure that we don't have a skills shortage. But what I would say is that we need to recast some of those figures with what the future looks like at the moment. So really good point, Joe. I think the skills requirement's very important for the sector as we move forward to have a really strong workforce to support new business. Thank you. I've done a lot of talking.
So what I might do, if okay, keep posting your questions, but I'll just hand over to Justin Giddings, CEO of Avalon Airport, who I know I've spoken to off and on, more on than off in the last 6-7 weeks. So I'd love to just hand over to Justin and see if he can give everyone a bit of a window into his, what would I say, aeroplane car park situation and what he thinks might be happening next. Are you there, Justin?
Yes, I am.
Hey.
Everyone. Sorry, I was a little bit late. I actually ran my first half marathon this morning, so there you go. So if I collapse, that's what I've done. So look, I'll just run through what we're doing and in terms of where I think things are at. Look, we've had a lot of dialogue with Jetstar recently about what they're doing. They still have flights on sale for June out of Avalon. I think that's very optimistic that they'll be flying the full range of flights though, but they are still for sale. I had a look online to see how many sales have been, and honestly, there's 3 or 4 a flight. People have booked a flight. So, but they still are for sale for June. So that will be interesting. There's some great opportunities, I think, with the Trans-Tasman coming up. So we're involved in that quite a bit. I won't go into too much detail, and I'm pretty optimistic about it, but I'm also, who knows what will happen there. But certainly the way the market will be, the yields or the prices or the ticket prices for the airlines will be able to achieve will be very low. So it's great for consumers, but it's bad for airlines. So they'll be looking to lower costs. So hence we've got a low cost airport here and we're trying to leverage that. So we're out there speaking to a lot of airlines over Zoom and by email really, trying to encourage them to maybe start back up out of here. So that's a thing that we've been doing for years, but it just might change the landscape a little bit. I know when we had a bit of a recession or a bit of a decline, especially in Geelong, things, sort of didn't go the way we wanted it to. So I'm sort of watching very, very closely. But anyway, Jetstar has been very active and we've been talking to them quite a bit. Virgin, you probably saw the press about Virgin and Linfox. So that was all pre-COVID-19 talks, really. Now they've gone into administration. Things have changed a lot. So and really it was more around Tiger and what the future of Tiger will be. So I'll leave that for now, but certainly we're watching that space very closely. AirAsia X is funny, they're just eager to come back. They ring me all the time. Can we start flights now? Can we start flights now? It's just crazy. And look, there will be no flights to Asia this year, no doubt. It's just unrealistic. And I've told them that, but they sent me a note yesterday, for example, saying we've suspended our services now to the end of June. I said, well, guys, like you're dreaming. But anyway, it's good that they're keen to come back. So I'd rather that than the other way. CityLink, I haven't really heard from. That's the Bali services. Again, that's not going to happen this year. I think they said they suspended till October, but that won't happen either. So the big thing, I suppose, is the air show. So there'll be an announcement this week on the air show, and I'm pretty sure the City of Greater Geelong and that haven't been advised yet. So I won't go into it too much other than it's likely, I know, it'll be delayed. But it won't be cancelled, which is good. But it's just probably going to be very impossible to have it for June, for March next year. There's just no way. Even if international flights are operating, just the money it costs to put it on and everything, it's just not going to generate the crowds. It's the centenary of the Air Force next year. So instead of being probably the first event leading into the centenary, it's probably going to be the last event. But there'll be more on that publicly later on this week. It was meant to be. There's just a few dates to be finalised, that's all. But what we're doing, what we're spending a lot of time is, I suppose, setting ourselves up to be part of the new world going forward, because certainly there's going to be a lot of changes to airline travel and terminals, the way terminals operate. We've already received a letter from AirAsia saying what they're doing. You probably saw all their PPE that their cabin crew are going to wear, but there's a lot more to it as well. There's a heap of things. So I think it might even be announced today, we're installing kiosks for check-in, so that there won't be the staff there anymore. So it'd be like, you know, when you go to Tulla or other airports, you go to a kiosk, and some of those kiosks will be fitted with technology that's touchless, so you won't even need to touch the computer. And they'll be installed pretty soon, probably by, I think it's meant to be by the end of May. We've got 6 or 8 in them there now, which aren't touchless, but there'll be some touchless ones coming. And there'll also be the bag drop systems, and they'll all be touchless as well. So that's brand new technology, and we'll be probably the first in Australia to have it. And like I said, I think it's being announced. Press release is going out today. We signed off on it yesterday anyway, so it should, with a company from Melbourne that's doing that technology. So it's a ripper for us. So when we start up the airport, we're going to have a relaunch, really, because it's there's going to be so many different things here. Other works we're putting in the latest CT technology in terms of X-ray, passenger X-ray and baggage X-ray in the domestic terminal. We had it in the international, we're the first in the world to have that. And now we're putting it in our domestic, and that will be the first, probably in Australia, to have domestic CT, and that's being installed as we speak. That's, you know, so we're spending quite a few $1 million in this time, because it's good to do these works when there's no passengers around, I must say. We're also doing a lot of structural work. We're removing some of the poles in the that have just annoyed us for years in the terminal. So we're doing a little bit of work. Our runway's closed today for a couple of days. We've actually closed the whole airport, and that's because we're doing some runway works as well. So, so this social distancing is going to be a big thing for passenger terminals, and we're just trying to get our head around whether or not it's a permanent or temporary thing. But we think that Avalon is really well situated to take advantage of those regulations. I'll give you an example. Well, AirAsia have suggested that they don't want people coming into the terminal who aren't flying. And so we probably have 10% of people who come into the terminal don't fly. Think people like meters and greeters, people dropping people off or whatever. And so that's going to change the dynamic a lot if we go down that path. We're not sure we will yet. But if that becomes mandatory by the government, then we're a lot better situated to actually implement that than, say, Tullamarine. So we're working very closely to see how we can do that. And that sets up a hell of a heap of other issues, like, you know, having people gathered outside in a non-secure environment and things like that. So we're just working through that at the moment. Probably the best thing that's come out of it is the way I think we've managed our staff. And this is not really tourism related, but it's just interesting. We've retained all of our staff. We had 47 casuals. We had about 35 full-timers. 9 casuals have left, just elected to leave to go and work elsewhere. They're mainly in the cafe, but all of them we've retained. We've either got them painting the terminal, they're doing the landscaping, they're doing the cleaning. We've actually outsourced some of them to the Department of Defence, who've got a property here. Some have gone to Cotton On. Cotton On is screaming for people here. So if you've got people who need work, just in the warehouse here, they're screaming out because they're so busy. And so being able to keep the staff has been really, really good. So, we've also opened up a new cafe as well. It's closed now, but we've opened it and we've finished it all off. So we've got 3 cafes here at the airport. So, so really, when we're ready to go, which will hopefully be, by June, perhaps with some domestic, hopefully, you'll see a different environment for sure. Things will be a lot different when you check in, with not just the infrastructure, but also the processes about where you need to go and what you need to do. So it's going to change quite a bit. So we're still working ourselves through that. So that's probably all I really had. Look, the tourism sector will initially start off with just local tourism. So then eventually we'll have some low-cost flying interstate. You saw Ellen Joyce's comments in the paper today talking about $19 fares to Sydney. So it's going to be very interesting the market, how it all reacts. I think a lot of people will take advantage of that. And to operate $19 fares, you really need a low-cost airport to do it. So no doubt, I think we're sort of prime position there. So yeah, so it's going to be good. Now, I don't think there was any questions from me. Interstate travel, yeah. So interstate travel, like I just mentioned, then will come on hopefully from June, and it'll be really cheap. So there's some really good deals for hotels at the moment. So and there's on TripAdvisor you can actually book things, pay, and then set the date later on. So it removes the risk as well. So it's probably worth having a look at. It's a great thing about tourist. Yeah, so I'm not sure what other questions there are.
Oh, Justin, I'll just jump in and say I snuck one in there amongst all the discussion about mature age travelling and the grey nomads is, and I asked you about this yesterday actually, and I'm sorry if I can't remember what you said, but if New Zealand does open up its borders between Australia, I don't think we had existing flights to New Zealand. Is it something that might be an option for Avalon?
Oh, for sure. Look, well, you know, ultimately we're the airport and we're just trying to attract airlines. So it's really the airline's decision to fly. But I do think that for the yield's going to be so low, people, you know, unemployment high, business confidence low perhaps, people won't want to spend a lot of money. But if they can get to New Zealand, because they're also getting a bit flat, like we all know, so they will want to travel. So it will be low cost. So, and we are a lot cheaper. Like we are a fraction internationally of the charges that Tullamarine have, you know, like a few percent. And likewise with domestic as well, but domestic, the actual dollar figure isn't as great. So yeah, definitely New Zealand would be a ripper. I mean, you know, it's not there by any means, and the government hasn't even announced it yet, but certainly we're putting our hand up to say we want that because it would make sense for sure. And we've wanted New Zealand for a long time. A lot of our Asian carriers, the barrier is that we don't have New Zealand flights because a lot of people fly down here, then they go on to New Zealand. And they get that feed as well because the New Zealand connections to Asia aren't as great as what they are here. So yeah, so New Zealand would be a ripper, but honestly, it's way too early to announce or say that. But hopefully by mid-year or even, well, maybe a little bit later, September or so, those routes will open up. There'll be lead time to sell tickets, I would imagine, but it'll be a ripper. And what Brett, I know Brett, I'll give Brett chance to speak now, but what Brett's doing with the Spirit of Tasmania will help us a lot as well in terms of freight. There's a lot of freight that comes in on the Spirit of Tasmania, an awful lot actually, and I think there might be some opportunities there for that as well.
Oh, Justin, now I want to ask you about freight, but we're talking about supply chain next week. So what I might do then, thank you so much, and it's good to see you, and it's you know, it's been really hard. I mean, we just want to sort of stress that the sector that we're talking about, as Brett Ince's data tells, has been just absolutely gutted, and I think we're all aware of it, but just hearing the reality on the ground in terms of the significant downturn is something we need to keep in mind, and we all really want to work hard at positioning Geelong and the region for growth as we hopefully get some easing of restrictions anyway. But look, I'm conscious that I'd love to hear from Brett Winter, and all I want to say before I hand over to Brett Winter is that it was like this shining beacon of light and hope when that announcement was made. I can't even tell you, and this is just personal, but you know, the amount of calls I had and feedback I had, and it just made everyone kind of think about what the world is going to hopefully be like down the track, but also this huge sort of opportunity for us, as Justin just said, in terms of not just tourism, but freight and the importance that then the port plays, being front and centre in people's minds more so than usual. So Brett Winter, if you're there, I will just ask if you can just give us just an overview and maybe an update on how your plans are going.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for that lovely introduction, Jen. It's certainly been welcome news for everyone as far as the Spirits are concerned, and naturally it's something we've been working on for some time, trying to really boost the Tasmanian trade connections was a key part of our strategy, and being able to announce something as exciting as that, albeit in a pretty doom and gloom sort of world at the moment, it certainly does give us something to focus on in the years ahead. And particularly from a tourism perspective, you know, it does, when you talk about rebooting and rebounding, the Spirit of Tasmanians are a real driver of that, you know, domestic visitation. And if you look at the nature of the customers that are actually using it, that there's certainly customers that are there to spend time in the regions, usually packing up the family. They're traveling in their cars, in their camper vans, caravans, whatever they've got essentially around, you know, Victoria and across Australia as well. So they're really high value tourism, you know, targets from our perspective. And so with this project, what it does, it really gives us that opportunity to leverage Geelong as a fantastic starting point or ending point, depending on where they're coming from, to their travels. And so the key thing for us really, you know, if we take a leaf out of Justin's book out at Avalon, is how do we leverage that with some of the partnerships, and how do we working with both the Tasmanian government and also TT Lines themselves, who are the operator of the Spirits, to try and maximise that value. Now we've done some preliminary work around that front, and, you know, talking about dollar values, you're talking about around about 57 million for tourism in Geelong, and it's about 174 million or thereabouts for Victoria. So they're pretty substantial numbers, you know, and they're going to really come at a time, once we're through all of these challenges, where the region hopefully will be rebounded quite strongly and be looking to maximise those kind of opportunities. So we're quite thrilled about the announcement, as you'd expect. Importantly, it is a 30-year deal. So this isn't a trial type operation. This is, they are fully committing to Geelong as their home base for their Victorian operations. And, you know, these vessels are iconic. You know, everyone's used to seeing these parked up down at Station Pier. They're now going to be in there at North Geelong, and they're going to become a real feather in our cap. If you think about Geelong as being a gateway city and all of the opportunities that presents from, you know, airport, a port perspective, the fantastic regional tourism that we're already offering, and the work that Brett and his team are doing there, you know, we've got a very bright future on that front. So my focus and my team's focus right now is really about delivering that project. And so we're in the very early stages of that. We've obviously got a pretty well advanced design that's enabled us to get to this point, but we are trying to mobilise a construction project in the middle of essentially a lockdown period, you know, which presents its own challenges, as you'd expect. Both from a planning perspective and also just, you know, physically getting on with the job and starting to get things moving on that front. We're pretty fortunate though, in that the area that we've selected over at Crikey South is going to give us a pretty free run at that. So we're not going to have disruption to our other trades. We're able to really ring fence that area and focus on just that development without disrupting or interrupting anything else that's going on in the port or the surrounding areas. And we need to deliver that by 2022. So it's not too far off. It sounds like it's a fair way away, but when you think about project delivery and all the wonderful things that you usually encounter when you're developing a major construction project, we've really got to get cracking on that front. So one of the key things that we're doing, aside from mobilising that project at the moment, is starting to open up those partnerships as well. And just this week, obviously, I've made the connection with Brett and his team and the TT guys. And once the restrictions start to ease, we're also hoping that we can get some face-to-face meetings going, both with those people from the TT Lines business, but also from, you know, the marketing, the support areas, the tourism areas in Tasmania. And we really want Geelong and Tasmania to strengthen those ties more broadly as well, because by working together and starting to explore some of those opportunities is really how we can capture these 450,000 visitors that are going to land on our doorstep from, you know, 2022 onwards. And in addition to that, of course, you've got the freight that comes with that Justin's mentioned too. So there's 105,000 20-foot equivalent units worth of freight. They're a critical provider of time-sensitive freight into Victoria, and obviously both down into Tasmania as well. So we'll be well positioned to leverage that even further. And when you combine all of those elements, you're really talking about a project that's a great economic driver for the region. Construction jobs, you've got ongoing jobs as far as the operation's concerned, you've got fantastic tourism benefits that are quite tangible. There's only a very small percentage of the people travelling on that vessel that are international travellers. For the most part, they are those travellers that are looking to get out and about and actually see the regions and spend money and time in the regions. And then you've also, of course, got the ongoing jobs that come from operating, you know, a 12-hectare terminal right there in the north of Geelong on our doorstep. So we're tremendously excited to bring this project to Geelong. We do have a few hurdles to overcome, and we'll certainly need a bit of help on that front. But the response that we've gotten has been overwhelming. And I think one of the key selling points that we had, whilst we're going through this project and negotiations and really trying to win that away from Victorian ports, was how Geelong would embrace the spirits. And it's been wonderful to see the coverage that we've got. And I certainly thank you, Jen, and all the committee members as well for the comments that you've added to that, because when you make a big call like this as a business and they're moving their long-term home, you want to make sure that you're welcome. You want to make sure that you're being embraced. And we've certainly had that to date. And I think moving forward, as things open up a little bit more and hopefully the restrictions start to ease, we can really work on strengthening those partnerships. And I really look forward to helping facilitate that over the coming months as well. So that's a quick, I guess, overview of what we're doing. There's certainly lots more detail on the project that I could talk about, and we'll share that as we progress moving forward. But first and foremost, this is a great opportunity coming at just at the right time, and I think we're going to be well placed to leverage off this across the whole region.
Oh, thanks so much, Brad. It's such a good story, and please feel free, anyone who wants to ask a question, jump in, because I've just got a couple of my own, and please post as we go. But just to sort of draw a thread amongst all three speakers today, and going back to what Brett Ince was saying, is how do we position Geelong? And we had the Mayor and Deputy Mayor on Zoom last week talking to Committee for Geelong members, and I raised with the Mayor the Brand Geelong project, which has had quite a long history, and we are so close. We are so close to hopefully landing that as a project. And she said she's really keen to kick it off again, because she actually had a forum planned. It was mid-March and it got cancelled. So I just thought I'd ask, when we talk about everything from the Spirit of Tasmania to the airport to general kind of tourism, is how do you see all of that working together, and what's the best thing that we could do in terms of positioning Geelong in the medium term, in terms of our identity, considering part of the discussion I was having with Brett Ince before this was how competitive it's going to be. So I suppose it's just a little bit of any feedback that you have around where do you actually see Geelong's position, and if we had a consolidated brand, which is bigger than just tourism, but let's just say it's a big part of what that conversation will look like, is what feedback could you give us, and what work can the committee and other members who are here today do to help that?
Do you want me to make a couple of quick comments, Jen?
That would be great. Thank you.
So building on what you were talking about, the Brand Geelong project, and some of the people on the line may remember this from a couple of years ago, really started from the context of, yes, tourism branding is one element of branding, and, positioning our destination from a tourism perspective is always going to be slightly different to how we consider our place brand, but it's going to have synergies and alignments. So the original project really stemmed from trying to bring a number of sectors together to consider how all of those sectors position and promote Geelong. So, when you think of tourism as a natural fit, but obviously the real estate sector, the development sector, when we're looking at the way in which we position more investment into the region as well, all of those things, so that we're singing by the same hymn book. So it's not necessarily about how do we develop a logo, it's more about how we have that same story across all of our organisations. And certainly from our point of view, we've always been a strong advocate of Brand Geelong. And as soon as I got back to Tourism Geelong Bellarine, I had a number of those discussions, and I know Jen, you and I have had a number of the discussions. The city, has a real want to move that project forward, but at the same time, from a tourism perspective, we've also worked on what are those destination stories of what we see as the sub-regions for our tourism region. So they're the 6 regions I went through prior. So we're moving forward with that work, and when we look at Brand Geelong, we consider it in the context of urban Geelong as a precinct. And part of that work is really looking at what are the tourism campaigns, and how do we position those towns, those sub-destinations, also the experiences within those areas, but then also how do we have a broader tourism-related campaign or brand in that sense. So from a Brand Geelong point of view, it's a larger project than just tourism. But what I would say is that tourism has quite a big sort of scenario into that. you know, even down to things like, do we call Geelong City a gateway city? Do we call it, you know, dare I say it, and I know that, you know, a second city, do we call it a regional, you know, city by the bay? All of those questions come into this. And really, we all need to come together, you know, speak as one, speak together on how we position Geelong. And that's really, I know that the Mayor wants to make sure that she has, from a communications background, a real want to see that happen. And even from a UNESCO point of view, you know, how do we position Geelong in terms of our City of Design designation? So from our point of view, we're moving forward with that. So we are ready. It's going to be highly competitive. But what I would say is that, you know, that is a broader project, Brand Geelong, about how we bring all of those areas together. So that's a few comments from me.
Thank you. So I don't know if any of the other speakers wanted to comment on that, because I can see a few more questions posted.
Look, I just will say, I think Avalon's been very fortunate that we've been able to work with everyone already. I mean, we've got a great relationship with Brett and the port as well, you know, and the city and everyone. So I think we're pretty good. One of the things that I like to see is almost like an aviation policy for the state, a bit broader than Geelong, just in terms of what Avalon means and what's the future, how's it going to look. I mean, we're at the moment focusing on low cost, and we've got some natural advantages there. Purchase price of the airport being one, but also we've got a pretty good model. But Tullamarine's Tullamarine, you know, they're going to be the major airport, and that's what it is. So maybe I'd like to see some sort of thought around some sort of policy with government about how they support airports, you know, I suppose leverage their natural advantages. The thing that we're out and about and talking about is Melbourne's third runway. And we're really saying that we're Melbourne's third runway. I know we're Geelong, but, you know, but really we are the third runway. It's got heaps of capacity. Tullamarine certainly don't need a third runway for some time now anyway, so it's probably going to be delayed, but I think there's an opportunity there. So it's a bit broader, but I think the Geelong network is very good, you know. We're always looking at ourselves and we're thinking, what can we do better? And that's fine, but, you know, I'm pretty pleased with the support that we get. And we're very fortunate, I suppose like everyone here, that everything that happens in Geelong that's good is good for us, because it means more people, more jobs, more discretionary spend money. You know, it just nothing hurts us really. You know, Deakin goes well, we go better. You know, Brett Winter pulls off that deal, we go well out of it. So, but vice versa too. I think Avalon is a key for everyone here as well. So if we can get those flights going, get more people coming to the region, it's great.
Thank you, Justin. Yeah, we've got a couple more minutes, but I just thought I'm happy to have a discussion with you, Justin. I'm not an aviation policy expert, but I know that from a state government perspective, they're looking at a port strategy for the state, obviously. So I might have a chance to unpick your thinking about that, because I can see how it would be really beneficial to have, you know, a statewide focus on what that infrastructure does and how maybe it works on a hierarchy level. But look, there was a couple of questions on the Zoom, and they were to Brett Winter. So I'll probably try and phrase it this way and say that when you build the terminal, the visitor experience, obviously you've got freight coming in as well with the Spirit of Tasmania. Just maybe explain where that actually sits geographically, because maybe people aren't aware the port's actually, you know, pretty significant in terms of its presence, and it stretches, you know, across quite a bit of space. So just maybe explain exactly where that is and what you're going to be building and what key kind of infrastructure it links to.
Sure. So the terminal actually built at our existing Cromarty South facilities. So it's just along Cromarty Road there. It's a 12-hectare site that we've got. It's directly adjacent to GrainCorp's facilities in Cromarty, and you've got also the sort of malting facilities that are around that area as well. The way the terminal is designed, there's really probably three sort of core components of the actual build. The first one being the passenger terminal itself, which is quite a large, it's quite a large warehouse that we're actually building there or using to actually repurpose. I say repurpose, but in effect, we're just keeping the shell, to be honest with you. That terminal is around about 6,000 square metres in size, so it's quite large. You can imagine the fit out for that will include everything from, you know, cafes, family amenities. You've got offices there for TT staff. You've got a cabin for their crew as well, who need to stay overnight at different points in time. It's a huge facility that you've got there, and it really lends itself to doing a number of different things. The other core component is the development of the loading ramp itself, and we're building quite a bespoke loading ramp, which is all based around a fast turnaround for these vessels. And the ramp that we're building them allows them to load on multiple decks at once, and it can handle both their current vessels and also their new vessels as well. And that's a key component of this decision that they've made, is that they're investing in 2 new vessels around about $700 million, and they're larger capacity from a passenger point of view and also a freight point of view. So we need to build a facility that's going to be able to fit what they do right now, but also what they're doing in the future. And then more broadly, the development really is sort of split into those 2 areas. You've got the passenger entry for passenger cars coming into the site, and then you've also got the freight entry. So we've got a very large area that's dedicated to staging of freight with 150 truck bays in there at Cromarty. So in essence, this facility will be almost ring fenced because we're giving them a dedicated berth, which is really crucial for their ability to come in and out. They do around about 800 sailings per year. And as you'd expect with a service like this, it's no different to the airport. You want things to run on time. So we can't afford to really put them in a common user facility where they might have to sit into a queue. So they're kind of the sort of core layout elements of that build. I think there were a few questions up there, Jen. I'm not sure if you want me to.
Yeah, there was a few. So I was just actually looking at the map to say that when they come through, they're actually coming through to join up to Cromarty Road. Is that right?
That's correct.
Yep. Yeah, the other question I think was just about jobs, I think. So maybe just a quick comment on that. And I know we've gone over time.
Yeah, very quickly. So up to 75 jobs in construction, which is fantastic. But the bigger focus as well is obviously long term. And being there 30 years, you're talking about jobs as far as stevedoring is concerned for all their loading operations that they do. You've got hospitality jobs for the running of the actual passenger terminal in that facility. There's also potential for jobs, servicing on board the vessel as well, although much of their crew is actually based out of Devonport at the moment. All of the ancillary aspects around that terminal too, and servicing and maintaining that, there's jobs in relation to that. And ongoing, of course, you've got security jobs as well. So it's actually quite a broad set of different jobs that will actually be created from that, and they'll be there for a long period of time to service these vessels. And that's not counting all of the opportunities around freight and logistics that will be generated for the need to actually move things in and out of this terminal too. So if you're running transport operations as an example in the region, this is all wheeled freight that we're talking about. So anything that's in that sort of sector will also benefit from this too.